the question of European rearmament is a huge one with many aspects, many moving parts, very many things happening. So I'm going to try and focus down on just two key points if I can. The first key point is that money and spending is not everything when it comes to rearmament and remilitarization. Point one. Point two, though, is that getting our heads around exactly where the money is coming from and how it is flowing and to whose benefit it is being used tells us something quite important about the overall dynamics of what's going on. So in December last year, tens of thousands of German school students staged a nationwide strike across 90 towns and cities. These young people staged mass protest actions against government proposals to vary Germany's much modified and historically contentious conscription laws. In 2011, conscription was put into abeyance by the German government, although the government always retained its powers to reintroduce it. In late 2025, the German government passed legislation to introduce a questionnaire to be completed by all 18-year-old men. The questionnaire is designed to determine their willingness to be conscripted, or to put it more bluntly, to kill and be killed. The 55,000 on the streets and the very many more of them who thought similarly gave their answer to that question. So why open a short discussion of European rearmament with this example? Because something as mundane as issuing a questionnaire and the explicit response to it helps us to clarify the nature of some of the moving parts in the maelstrom of noise, deception and confusion swirling around the rearmament issue. For instance, why is Germany edging towards conscripting 18-year-olds when any war they might be sent to die in will be dominated at best by high-tech, hyper-sophisticated, already battle-tested death machines, or at worst, the prospect of nuclear war and universal destruction? To what use will a relative handful of inexperienced and untrained near children be put in a war waged with drones, AI-enhanced weaponry, missiles and the rest, other than as potential victims for drones, AI weaponry, missiles and the rest? What, if not the normalization of a drive to war and the prospect of war itself, is the purpose of this move? What, if not a clumsy attempt to garner societal consent for a drive to war, is the purpose of this questionnaire and similar moves we see elsewhere? The basic fact of the matter is that European rearmament and the remilitarization of society is about more than dollars, pounds and euros. Money and finance is political, of course, but there is a lot more to political power than money alone. Coercion and consent walk hand in hand, which is why the tens of thousands of protesters in Germany and a growing number across Europe are of such importance. We do not consent, and we will not be easily coerced into driving along their road to war. Yet this war fever is real, and the instruments of political power fueling European rearmament are very real indeed. Take, for instance, it's truly remarkable decision by European Union institutions to issue 150 billion euros in loans to finance war readiness. This scheme was originally named Rearm Europe and then rechristened Security Action for Europe, or SAFE. You see what they did there? This 150 billion is to be found using a mechanism originally proposed and designed at the close of the 1980s for the purposes of eliminating unemployment, poverty, for funding social needs and improving life in general across the European Union. At the time, this proposal was roundly and tragically, in my opinion, rejected by the main powers in the EU. Now the mechanism has been revived, not for the purpose of social good, but to facilitate death and destruction. European states have been told, as we have been told in the UK, that all the additional arms spending, all this preparation for war, will produce dividends across the economy. It's true, as multiple research studies have indicated, that the multiplier effect of military spending, that is, the society-wide economic benefits of spending, is much lower for spending on weapons than for other sections of the economy. But it should be noted that there is a multiplier effect. It's just not as significant as for other sectors of the economy, which is why the mechanism employed for SAFE is, from this point of view, remarkable. They've made a deliberate political choice to send money one way. So I think we need to assume that they are not sincere about society-wide dividends for military spending. And if we dig a little deeper, we get another telling dimension to our story. Take, for instance, Professor Elke Schwarz's recent research and submissions to Parliament, parliamentary committees, on the role of venture capital in the context of the UK's national security and strategic defence review. Schwarz points out that historically, venture capital has not been a major factor in the defence sector. She characterises venture capital as being focused on, to quote, specific technology, not on specific technology, but growth in valuations. And the higher the valuation, the larger the gains on investors' equity stakes at the point of exit. To be very clear, she continues, the business aim of venture capital companies is not necessarily to invest in a robust British technology innovation base, but rather in the growth potential of the companies that are enrolled into the defence industry environment. She goes on to point out that significant lobbying, political influence, and structural tactics are employed by venture capital, and they're deployed to secure their interests. Venture capital is now deeply interested in UK and European-wide arms manufacturing and the arms industry. And the bedrock of venture capital is based where? In the United States. What we are seeing is a massive state-backed, deliberate and coordinated facilitation of US venture capital and their interests in the arms industry, an industry that is increasingly high-tech, AI-driven, and increasingly destructive. Which brings us back to the brutal politics of the matter. For all the talk of the US as an unreliable ally in the so-called defence of Europe, for all the question marks raised over NATO, for all the fire and fury from the White House, for all this, the reality is that the US nuclear presence in Europe is not getting smaller, it is expanding. US firms are circling European rearmament, looking for massive profits. European states, whatever the views of various fractions, are committed to mass rearmament and war-fighting preparedness. And in doing so, they are engaged in a massive state assistance program for US venture capital. That far from ensuring the defence and security of Europe, Europe is being primed for plunder and put at more risk. All of which are much more points us in the direction, in one direction, the need to build clear, consistent and honest opposition to European rearmament, and the need to redouble our efforts pointing towards the concept of common security. Thanks.